Maria Vercimak is a licensed professional counselor and works for Catalpa Health in Wisconsin. Her passion is mental wellness, so she has given presentations on communication, storytelling, thought processes, brain health, and self-care to a variety of audiences. We are thrilled to have her with us today, so please welcome Maria Vercimak.
I'm going to be that person right now. I'm getting a lot of feedback, so I think there's somebody who's not on mute, and I just want to make sure that we all can hear as best as possible. So thanks.
It could potentially be someone that's called in.
I think it's June. I think it's June's cell phone.
Okay. So one of my first jobs out of college, I was an elementary school teacher, and my first year teaching, one of my third graders asked for help, and I leaped to my feet and I threw myself, my almost 6 foot, over 200 pound self, into a tiny child-sized desk because physics were never my strong suit. And after a moment of panic, I realized I couldn't get out. So what I said to him was, and I'll say to you, you're kind of stuck with me for a little bit. One of the things that I love is mental health. I think Tina said it, it is becoming a bigger topic, which I think it always should have been, but that's just my bias. What I'd like for you to do for just a moment is imagine that you're a young child, even younger than the 9-year-old that I was trying to help. Allow your imagination to drift back to maybe your 5-year-old self or your 6-year-old self. And as you do this, imagine you're walking home from school. The bus has just dropped you off and you're making your way up the driveway. And out of nowhere comes this huge dog who charges at you, knocks you down, and there you lay, gravel on your back, staring up at a growling dog. Mom sees this happen from the kitchen window, rushes outside, chases the dog away, picks you up, and hugs you. But now, 40 years later, dogs are still terrifying. One of the things that I want to talk about is how not to lose in the moment. And we're going to take this time to start building a foundation. And the first piece to our foundation is not losing. And the easiest way we lose is through triggering. This fight or flight, 0 to 100 experience that we can all relate to. So, brain facts. The part of our brain that's in charge of this is called our amygdala. The amygdala sends adrenaline and cortisol flooding through our body to react. 0 to 100 experience. If you've had children, you might have seen this happen when they don't get what they want, or they throw themselves on the ground and throw that fit. Yeah, this amygdala moment, this fight or flight response. So going back to the story of the boy who's now a man being scared of dogs, all it takes is seeing a dog and the amygdala starts firing this terrifying experience. One of the things that's really tricky about the amygdala is the amygdala doesn't know the difference between an actual threat and not a threat. That is so tricky. Because, for example, with a dog, you're walking along down the road, you're 45 years old, you're not a little kid anymore, and this dog comes running to you because he got loose, and the amygdala doesn't recognize that you're not 5 anymore. In that instant, you are not 45, you're 5. And dogs are scary. So, financial connection. What we're going to go through is your insurance policy for how to prevent those fight or flight moments. What is insurance? Insurance is something that I take on, not because I want to have an accident, but because if I do, I'm protected. That's what we're going to look at. How do I prevent, or how do I protect myself in the midst of being triggered? Well, the first thing, I've got to know what my triggers are. So step 1, what are the things that trigger me? It could be feeling stupid. It could be wasting time. It could be trauma that you've experienced as a child, dogs. I was working with somebody, and it was, their trigger was a ticking clock. Kind of random, but I even had a mom whose trigger was birthday candles. And part of me was like, there's got to be a story behind that. Please tell me about birthday candles. One of the things, triggers come from trauma, words. And as you know, in your industry, words, I imagine, would be super important. So what I'm saying about words is when somebody negates you, and I'm going to use Tina. So I asked Tina what her favorite color is, and she's like, it's purple. And I'm like, no, it's not. So I just negated her. So being negated, being judged, or being projected on, all can be triggers. The third one is kind of interesting. So trauma, words, and the last one is somebody interacting with me the opposite of how I'm wired. So what I mean by that is I'm who I am as a teacher. I want people to understand. So what's the biggest trigger for me? When people don't understand me. So connecting with me the opposite of how I'm wired. One of the most vulnerable things that you could do is go and ask somebody, your best friend, somebody that you're in a relationship with, and go, hey, what do you think my triggers are? They might have a good idea. So step 1, identifying your triggers. Step 2, coming up with a plan. So when somebody doesn't understand me, what do I want to do? Because what happens is the brain only knows the way it's been programmed. And so I was thinking about this morning, And one of the things I love about my phone is it has a flashlight in here. I think that's great. I've used it so many times when it's dark and I'm trying to get the key in my door handle. But the thing about the flashlight is it's only programmed to do what? Shine the light. That's it. That is all it's programmed to do. And the same thing happens in our brain. The triggering response is all my brain knows. So what I need to do is I need to come up with a plan. I need to come up with an appropriate plan. So one of the things that's really common in the old days, what they would talk about is a physical response, okay? So it could be twirling your ring. You get triggered and your response is gonna be twirling your ring. Taking deep breaths. One of the guys I was talking to is helping him with his triggers, and his physical response was just adorable. What he would do is he would go like this. And for him, it was this clear reminder, choose your words carefully. Tapping your foot. My mother-in-law has big, beautiful curls. So what does she do when she gets triggered? Plays with her hair. I was working with some teachers, and what they would do is when they would get triggered in their classrooms, they would take a sip of water. Whatever it is that is healthier than like, what's going on? When I was working in corrections, I had a 16-year-old young man trigger, and I watched him rip a door in half. I was like, well, that's not good. Oh dear. And then he proceeded to kick out 2 van windows. I was like, super, thanks. So we get a plan in place. We identify our triggers, we get a plan in place, and now comes the interesting part. So many years ago, they did this study. And what they did is they took 60 people and they divided them up into groups of 20. And in these 60 people, they taught them a little ditty on the piano, okay? So the first group of 20, they said for the next month, don't practice the ditty. The next group of 20, they said practice the ditty every day. And the third group of 20, they said, only practice in your imagination. Okay, so at the end of the month, as you can well imagine, the first group was terrible, like they had regressed. The second group was better. The third group that only practiced in their imagination was just as good as the second group that practiced every day. Your brain does not know the difference between rehearsing and reality. If anybody's a sports person, what do? You spend more time rehearsing than you actually do playing the game. Our brain, when it comes to our triggers, operates the same way. So I was working with a girl. She was afraid of getting shots, like doctor shots, stuff like that. When she was 13, it took 3 people to hold her down. She was now 15. She had to get a flu shot and was freaking out. She comes to my office and I'm like, Mom's frustrated. Mom's actually a nurse. And she's like, how does my daughter be scared of flu shots? I am a nurse. What did I do wrong? Probably nothing. But here we are. We're sitting in my office and I have her use her imagination. And I give her the flu shot 3 times through her imagination. That's it. It was that simple. She goes to the doctor 2 days later. She did her plan. Her plan was to stare at the signage in the doctor's office, because there's always like something up there, so you just stare straight ahead. Nobody had to touch her. Got the flu shot, done. It took last time it took 3 people to hold her down. That's the power of using our imagination and rehearsing. This is the biggest insurance policy you can have in your life. That's our foundation. Dealing with our triggers. It was funny, I was talking to another group about triggers, and it was kind of humorous because everybody else was talking about how that person should deal with their triggers and how that person should deal with their triggers. And it's like, no, I need to deal with my triggers. And I love the quote, even the nicest people have their limits, right? Right. Great foundation. How to get in the moment. Now we set up this insurance policy so we don't lose in the moment. How to get in the moment. Last summer, I was scheduled for my first mammogram. Hooray! And I was one of those people who looked online and I'm like hearing all the horror stories, and my imagination ran amok. I was absolutely terrified. So I drive into the parking lot. This is the summer of 2020. Drive into the parking lot and I'm like, I forgot my mask. Who forgets their mask when they're going to a doctor's appointment? This person did. What the heck? I had so many thoughts. I was so worried and scared and nervous. So I'm watching all these people. It's a huge facility. All these people all have their mask on. And here I am walking in without a mask. They had one ready for me. Yay! They took my temperature. And they're like, well, what are you here for? And I said, I'm here for a mammogram. And they're like, oh, it's by the green carpet. And so I'm like, great, that sounds awesome. So I look around and I feel like I've just gone blind. There is no green carpeting anywhere. And I'm just like, and I'm panicked. I'm gonna be late for my appointment. Why is this happening to me? And the lady who was standing next to me, who had just taken my temperature, must have seen the look on my face. And then she pointed. And I look, and here's this tiny piece of green. And I'm like, I seriously wanted to get into an argument with her, because I'm like, that's not a carpet, that's a chunk of green. Don't tell me that there's this green carpet when this is like this little square of green. And I recognized I was overwhelmed. The reason I forgot my mask, the reason I couldn't see the green carpet is I had way too many thoughts. Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie where the mom has a baby on the hip, is talking to her girlfriend on the phone, is making breakfast, her husband comes in, honey, which tie should I wear for this really important meeting? And she's yelling at the 5-year-old in the other room. So brain facts. Women can have more than one thought in their head at a time. I know, right? Optimally, physiologically, we can have 5 thoughts in our brain at once. Gentlemen, optimally, not that you can't have more, but 1. I'm not trying to be sexist. I'm not trying to get into an argument right now. What I'm talking about, the biggest asset that you guys have is your brain health. That's a financial connection. You protect your assets. The biggest thing that you have is your brain. Whew. That's it. So, mental wellness is getting down to less thoughts. Women, we're fine with 5 thoughts. We got it going on. Come on. But what happens with thought number 6? And thought number 6 has 3 other friends. And this guy over here. And that's when we crash. That's when we crash. So, in order to get down to less thoughts, there's a couple of tricks that I'd like to talk about. So, when it comes to brain facts, it's the fact that for women, we can have up to 5 thoughts. For gentlemen, for men, the best optimal is 1 thought. Financial connection, these are your assets. Your brain health is your asset. So how do we get to better brain health? Or how do we protect our assets? We get down to less thoughts. So one of the ways we get down to less thoughts is by doing a brain dump. So number 1, brain dump. A brain dump is where we write down a thought, and with every thought, there's a connecting emotion to that thought. So with the mom, you know, she's got her baby on the hip. She's worried because he was coughing this morning. She's got the girlfriend on the phone and she's laughing at a joke that she just told the girlfriend has said. She's making breakfast and she's frustrated because it's not coming along as fast as she wanted it to. The husband walks in, which tie, honey? Now she's annoyed. And she's mad at the 5-year-old who's screwing around in the other room. So it's not just all these facts, it's all the emotions that are connected to these facts. So when we're doing a brain dump, it's the idea that we're getting out these facts and we're getting out the emotion. And the other thing I would say, so it's the fact, the emotion, and the intensity of that emotion. So if it's annoyance on a scale of 0 to 10, how intense is that annoyance? Well, it's a 3. You should ask me last night. Another thing that's really important to get out, and I'm going to say this, is if you're looping. So looping is that fact that kind of comes in and then it disappears for a moment and then comes back around and then it disappears and comes back around. Those are definitely those thoughts that need to get written down for sure. So number 1, brain dump. Number 2, talking out loud. There is a reason why people who have pets and plants tend to have better mental health. Because we talk to them. They're not judgmental. They don't project on us. It's amazing. A few years ago, I had a really toxic job. I worked in corrections. And I didn't want to bring that toxicity home to my family. It was one thing for me to choose this job, but I did not want to take it into my house. So one of the things I would do is I would get home, park the car, get out, and I would walk around the yard for about 20 minutes. And in those 20 minutes, I just talked to myself. Like, I got attacked today. Somebody called me a name. This didn't work out. This did work out. And I just talked and I talked and I talked and I talked. And after about 20 minutes, I could go back. I could go into my house and know, okay, guys, I'm ready. So brain dump, talking out loud. For those of you who are artists, doodling, drawing, creating. And maybe not even just art, but if you play the piano, or if you are an instrumentalist, it's playing out those emotions and those feelings. So when I work with kids and they have a test and they're stressed out with a test, what does that look like? What does that stress look like on paper? Doodling, that doodling or whatever. The best artists, especially like Adele or, just different people like that, that is what their art is. They go through something, they experience something, and then they get it out. Poets, So the last one, and this is what I do, is you talk to somebody. You talk, you vent, you rant. I had a girl a few years ago. I saw her once a month, and for 50 minutes, without even hardly taking a breath, she ranted. I sat there and she ranted, and she ranted and she vented, and then she would be like, okay, I'll see you in a month. And then she would leave. And then a month later, she'd blah, 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 blah. Optimally, a month is too long. Because of how our brain works, you're looking at you should be doing one of these 4 things every 24 to 48 hours. Very, 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 very important. One of my favorite phrases to ask people when I'm trying to help them get out their thoughts is, what else? What else? Okay, you shared that. What else? What else is there? How not to lose, how to get, and now what to do. This is probably the most vulnerable part of this presentation, because I'm going to let you into my life and share some stories about the crazy things that I do. So what to do in the moment. So one of the things that's a tradition in my family is Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving dinner is this 4-hour feast that 30 plus people show up to pre-COVID. And it's about 4 hours between the, setting up all the food and eating and, conversating. And there are some years where those 4 hours feel like 8. It's like, when is this going to end? And there are some years when it feels like 1. It feels like a breath. Like, what just happened. I thought we just brought the mashed potatoes and now we're walking out the door. Wow. In sports, they call it being in the zone. This idea of your body and brain just going forward in elegant perfection. For our mental health purposes, we're going to call it flow. So, brain fact, flow is this toggling between the conscious brain and the unconscious brain. And it's a beautiful thing. So what do I want in my life? Do I want the 8-hour Thanksgiving dinner experience, or do I want the Thanksgiving experience that feels like a breath? What do I want in my workday? How do I want my Fridays to feel? Grueling? Torturous? Never ending? I've looked at the clock so many times. Or do I want to walk away on Friday and go like, wow, that was amazing. And that's flow. The financial connection is flow is your compound interest. Flow is compound interest. When you're thinking of how to maximize your asset, it's through flow. So, one of the best ways to get into flow is by playing a game. Game allows us to step into that, but only after we've done the other two pieces. If you're getting triggered, you cannot flow. If you have too many thoughts, you cannot flow. All these other steps have to take place first before you can flow. So when you think of games, just take a minute, what kind of games come to your mind?
Are you looking for feedback? I'm not sure.
Just taking a minute. So there are 4, believe it or not, there are just 4 different types. Yeah, charades, absolutely. Thank you. There are 4 different types of games. That's it. Okay. And so everything else fits under one of those types of games. So the first one is probably the type that we're most familiar with. I'm from Wisconsin, so I'm very familiar with the Packers and football. So that type of game is called competition. Makes sense, right? So how does this apply in real world? Well, if you're a parent, you're like, okay, little Johnny, okay, little Susie, let's pick up our toys and I'm gonna time you. What does that do with the kids? Gets them into flow. Now this arduous task isn't so bad anymore. I was with my mother-in-law, so it was me and my husband and his parents. And we had to go to Walmart to pick up parchment paper. So my husband goes to my mother-in-law and he's like, you have 6 minutes to get the parchment paper. And then he pulls out his phone, sets the timer, he's like, go. My mother-in-law flew out of the car. She's running into Walmart. She sprints down the aisle. The 3 of us now are just strolling, you know, how you do. You just kind of go around slowly. By the time we came back around, there she was like 5 minutes and 30 seconds. She had made it. And if you knew my mother-in-law, she is the nicest person, but it was so funny to hear her tell how there was a person in front of her that was slow. And she's like, what are you doing? I gotta get back. She was in flow. It was awesome. We laughed so hard watching this really sweet lady like get into the spirit of competition. Oh, so good. Number 2, another favorite of mine, role play. Role play is another type of game. In the Harvard Business Review, they call it psychological Halloweenism. And much like your kids and kiddos dress up and put on a different persona during Halloween, that's really what they're talking about. Taking on a different persona to handle a situation by getting into flow. So I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but dinner is kind of draining sometimes. My husband and I had a really, really hard day. We had nothing prepared. There was no leftovers, like nothing easy. So we settled on spaghetti and we're just drained. And he suggested, let's turn dinner into an Olympic event. And we are the announcers. So now, as water's boiling, we're commentating on the water boiling. As the meat is getting browned, we're commentating on the meat getting browned and the sauce boiling and simmering and the smells and the scents. And all at once, dinner's fun. All at once, what went from being a mind-boggling drain to now us both having all this energy and enjoying our experience as we're kind of going back and riffing with each other. The third type of game is chance. Think gambling, shooting craps. One of the things, practical application of chance is putting a whole bunch of tasks in a cup and then randomly picking out what the task is that you need to do and making it a game. Because some things just aren't that fun, but maybe when it's random, maybe when it's just something you're like, oh, here's what I need to do. All at once it's a game and you're focused. The last type of game is called vertigo. Vertigo is your roller coasters, bungee jumping, extreme sports type of situation. It's dance, spinning, and moving. So another example, my husband and I, we had just been in a meeting, much like this, and a lot of information had been thrown at us, and so we were overwhelmed. So what we decided to do is we put on some swing music, because we like to dance, and we just started dancing together. And all at once, the fatigue left, the mental fatigue left, and we were having fun. And we continued on with the rest of our day. 5 minutes of dancing changed everything. I don't know if you are like me, music is a big thing having to do like something like this, having to do a presentation, you know, putting on the Rocky, you know, music, da 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 da, ba 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 ba. Oh, where did that fatigue go? Where did all those extra thoughts go? How not to lose, how to get, and what to do. One of the things that I hope is that something resonated with you, and something was there that you know, you could take away. But my biggest, one of my favorite stories is Grandma Elsie. Grandma Elsie lived to be 105 with all her mental capacities because she found a way to live in the state of flow all the time. She played games. One of the things when she was, I think, 90, her family asked her what they could get her for a gift. Because what do you get a 90-year-old that pretty much has everything, lives in assisted living? And she's like, I want a piano. I want a little keyboard because I want to teach myself at 90 how to play the piano. At 93, she got into a fist fight with another resident who had accused her of cheating at cards. This was Grandma Elsie. One of the things that I've learned, that in spite of COVID, in spite of all of this, is when I choose to focus on my mental health, I get to be in flow, and I get to have great days, and I get to have fun, and I get to bring joy, like Grandma Elsie did, to everybody around me. Thank you.
That was really great. I know you see people clapping. I'd like to just unmute for a minute and direct comments that anybody would like to make, any questions. We have a few minutes left, so you know, I love the comments that I'm seeing in the chat boxes, but is there any questions that you have?
Yeah, please. I love it.
This was an absolutely wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. So much. I know my day's gonna flow a whole lot better.
I'm
Oh my
excited.
gosh, thank you.
It's a brain dump.
Thank you for the reminder. I think that most of us, because of what we do for a living and with people, I think we do flow quite well most of the time. But because of the situation we're in right now and we're not doing our jobs that we would normally do, it was a great reminder that we have to stay in the flow. And perfect. I mean, just perfect. And the persona, we take on a lot of different personas, and we forget to put the happy persona on during all of this. So thank you very, very much. That was great. I want it in paper though. I couldn't keep up with the notes. I'm like too fast.
Maria, do you have the answers kind of filled in?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. I can send you that, Tina, of course. Yes.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was writing them all in the right spots or not myself, but I'd love to just have a little summary. Although you also sent it, well, did you send? I can't remember. We have a lot of speakers, but yeah, send that to me and I'll make sure we get it posted.
Perfect.
Anyone else? I'm seeing some thank yous from people who haven't spoken. So thank you so much for being with us.
I have just a quick question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Back at the beginning, you talked about being projected upon as a trigger. Could you just give an example of what projected upon means?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm going to just back up and I'm going to clarify both of them. So being judged is you're stupid for liking the Packers. Okay, so that's being judged. My value is now less. Okay, so being projected on is the idea of oh, thank you. Sorry, it is just escaping me right now. So being really being projected on is like you like the you think the Packers are the greatest team ever. That would be being projected on. Okay. Thanks. That was a good question. I was like, wait a second.
Thank you.
I've heard that often it's really a good thing to have a gratitude journal, even just to write down 3 things a day that you're thankful for, because I think we can get so overwhelmed by negative things that if you can just kind of stop and write down 3 things. And sometimes, you know, you might write those 3 things for a few days and then realize, okay, there are other things out there that I can be thankful for. That it helps keep us in a better frame of mind. I don't know if you've used that or if others do that, if that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I took a class called The Science of Happiness through Harvard, and the professor talked a lot about that. And it's not only just, you know, being appreciative, but also the chemicals, the happy chemicals that start happening when you do that is pretty standard science. You know, it's like, yeah, that is what happens. So yeah, great observation for sure.
I thought it was interesting that you said one of the triggers could be wasting time, and that one I went, oh yeah. When people are like wasting my time, I just get like starting to shake almost, and I find myself doing that with my own family, and so I'm glad to hear that there's some ways that I can kind of like try to calm myself down. Take a deep breath. I mean, I tell my kids to do that, but then I realize, you know, I need to do these things too. So thank you. I don't know, that one just resonated with me.
Tina, I was just thinking about, which is funny timing because I was late to the task force thing the other day, but a trigger for me is being late because I have a mother who's incredible, but she won't take the trash out to the garbage can without full makeup and hair and everything else. And so, I mean, I was late to everything my entire life. I mean, people just knew if they said to be there at 2, I would show up at 3 because I was waiting on my mom. And so as an adult, I cannot handle being late. If I'm late by 1 minute, I am like, I just can't do it. It sets me mentally. I just am like, I don't know. It brings me back to that. So.
Yeah, we got to come up with plans to manage our triggers and not push away the people in our lives. But I mean, it's good to have standards and high standards, but it's if you start to react inappropriately, that's when it becomes a problem, you know. And for me, it's the same thing. I like things to be, you know, moving along and running well, and then I get all freaked out, and sometimes I don't respond appropriately to people when I'm in that frame of mind. Okay.
Maria, sorry, one more thing I was just going to add. I don't know if you've heard this or not, but even the word trigger, which has become very popular the last few years, everyone says triggered and this triggers me and triggered. And it's like, it just is a very common phrase now, or a common word now, that the word trigger has even become a trigger for some people. And so this last year, my wife and I went through some classes to become a foster home. And so we had to learn about a lot of different things. And
Yes.
they actually talked about that. And so in that class, we were taught to try not to use the word trigger because that can be an issue for people. And we had to refer to them as trauma reminders. And so that was the modern phrase for trigger, and which was interesting. It's like even the word trigger has become what it is. So.
And the thing that I would take, thank you so much for sharing. And I think that's awesome that you and your wife are stepping into foster care. That is, whoa, kudos. That's amazing. And thanks for sharing. That's so awesome. I could not agree more, you know, the whole idea that triggers, you know, could have a negative connotation. And that's unfortunate because a trigger in and of itself is not good or bad. The fact that I'm triggered when I feel stupid, like, that's not good or bad. It's what I decide to do with it that makes it what it is.
Yeah, I think it's almost, to what they were trying to tell us was like it's almost become weaponized. It's like, oh, don't be triggered, or oh, you're just triggered, and like people use it like that now. Whenever if somebody doesn't like something I did, you know, and I say, oh, you're just triggered. That's like basically saying that what you think doesn't matter, and you're being unreasonable, which is not true, you know.
Right. Oh, that's painful. I'm sorry. I'm just cringing. Yeah, that is unfortunate, because we all have triggers and we all have, I've just seen some amazing results. I've worked with some really difficult kids and they've worked through this and just seen amazing, amazing results of how much their life is their quality of life is so much better because they've worked and rehearsed their triggers.
Well, it is just coming up on 10 o'clock, so we're going to have to say goodbye, Maria, and we are going to be going into a networking session that will allow us to talk about this a little bit more. So again, thank you so much for being with us this morning and giving us some good things to talk about during this next session.